Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting of September 29th, 2020. And it is 7:02 p.m. and I'm calling the meeting to order. Administrative Assistant Dubois, would you please take the roll?
Yes, thank you. Chair Supple?
Aye.
Commissioner Elliott? Not present. Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez?
Here.
Commissioner Vrees Daniels?
Here.
Commissioner Sandal?
Here.
We have 4 members present. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we need to approve the agenda. And by the way, thank you for posting it that way so I didn't forget. So is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez.
Second, Suzanne Sandal.
It's been moved by Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez and seconded by Commissioner Sandal to approve the agenda. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Chair Supple?
Thank you.
Commissioner Reagan Gonzalez?
Aye.
Commissioner Vrees Daniels?
Aye.
Commissioner Sandal?
Aye.
We have 4 ayes. Thank you.
Thank you. We have approved the agenda. Next, we're going to consider a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding for a future amendment to the contract with Cedar Point 2 Development LLC for the Cedar Point 2 Apartments Development Project. And I'm going to turn it over to Executive Director Stark. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Supple and Commissioners. As you know, this is a project we've been working on for quite some time. The current development team, I believe, has been working on it since 2018. But really, we've been looking to develop this site since 2003 or 4. And the city acquired many of these lots in the 2004 timeframe, and then again in 2014 or 15 acquired additional ones. So as I said, we've been working on this project a long time. We feel like we see the finish line with the developer NHH and a new team they're bringing to the deal. And with that, I would ask Housing and Redevelopment Manager Julie Urban to provide the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director, Chair Supple, and members of the Commission. As Executive Director Stark explained, we've been working on this project for some time, and back in 2018, September 17th, you approved a contract for private development with NHH Companies, which is now doing business as CP2 Development LLC. The contract calls for the construction of 218 market rate apartments on HRA-owned property located on Richfield Parkway between 63rd and 65th Street, or commonly known as across from Target and Home Depot. The overall project actually consists of 2 components, the second of which is construction of 64 affordable townhomes on property located to the west of the apartments. And a separate contract was approved for that portion of the development. So there are 2 time-sensitive issues that need to be addressed at this time, and I do want to say thank you very much for the being willing to hold a special meeting to help us, give us some time to work through some stuff, but still meet your time needs. And a special thanks to staff, Latanya and Jane, for helping out with this. But so the 2 time-sensitive issues that we need to address is that the contract, number one, the contract currently provides for a closing date on the HRA-owned property of September 30th, so tomorrow. So we are close, but we are perhaps 1 to 2 weeks away from that being finalized. The developer does need to own the property in order to proceed with utility work that impacts both the townhomes and the apartments. The second time-sensitive piece is that the developer has applied to the Planning Division for an increase in the number of units from 218 to 237. Since the HRA is still the owner of the property, you need to authorize that application. It is also a detail that's in the contract for private development, and so it's something that you also need to address from that perspective. That timing is critical because construction drawings need to proceed and they need to have a final answer on that number of units before they can get ready for building permits. So These items all work together and impact other parts of the contract, including the amount of tax increment that would be generated with an increase in units. Detailed contract language is in process of being drafted for consideration at the October HRA meeting, but action on the time-sensitive items needs to be acted upon before that time. So in order to keep the development forward, we're recommending that the HRA adopt a Memorandum of Understanding that will extend the closing date to October 31st. And also, the MOU would detail, or does detail, the intentions of both parties for moving forward with a contract amendment in October. And so it just generally describes the terms that we will be addressing in that contract. So regarding the increase in units, the developer is proposing to increase units from 218 to 237, so an additional 19 units. Current rental market demand and the decision by the development team to focus amenities in one building freed up some space to allow for an increase in total number of units. So the number of studio and one-bedroom apartments is increasing, and the number of two-bedroom units will decrease slightly by 6 units. So by planning standards, the change is considered a minor amendment to the PUD, and so they're in process of reviewing that. They've completed their review and are just waiting on authorization from you as the property owner. So the project with additional units would generate additional tax increment. Along with some changes in the housing market has strengthened, especially the Richfield housing market, since the original contract as well. So there is additional increment that would be available. The developer has requested that they receive a portion of that additional increment. And so we analyzed the numbers, and we have decided and realized that there is available increment that could benefit both the HRA as well as the developer. And so we've worked to find a way to make that work. And so we described that in the MOU. And I think what maybe what I'll do too is just remind you of what the current terms under the contract are. They're a little bit complicated, again, because of the two components of the project, but being in two separate contracts. It's just slightly more complicated than maybe what we've had in other contracts. So first of all, under the contract, the HRA has pledged a tax increment pay-as-you-go note of $3.96 million to the developer. As usual, the HRA would take 10% of the tax increment for administrative purposes. In the case of this development, beginning in year 9, 10% of the increment would be distributed to the Housing and Redevelopment Fund. In years 21 to 23 of the district, the HRA would receive additional increment for an estimated total contribution of about $486,000. In addition, the developer would pay the HRA $1.11 million for the apartment property that we currently own. And that is to be, so those are the terms of the current contract. So what we have looked at the additional increment that's being generated, which is about 1.8 million in additional increment. We wouldn't spend necessarily all of that, but under the development, what we would do is the developer would pay the HRA an upfront additional $780,000 at closing of their construction loan. What we will, the public purpose that we would use that money for would be the current assessment that's levied against the property. If you'll remember, the city constructed Richfield Parkway several years ago, and they bore much of the cost of that, but there was a percentage, I believe it's 20% of those costs were levied against the HRA property. The HRA was given the property, and then this $780,000 is the bill that is hanging out there. So this additional cash would enable us to spend to pay off that special assessment. So in exchange for them providing us cash up front and assuming the risk of a TIF pay-as-you-go note, the HRA would provide the developer an additional $780,000 in TIF plus a debt coverage amount of 20% for a total of $936,000. The developer has asked specifically that that increment be divided between some to go to the original note. So an additional $345,000 would be added to the $3.96 million note. And then there would be a second note provided in the amount of $590,800. So we would still receive the $1.11 million in acquisition funds. And that would be flexible funds that we could make available if on the townhome side, because there's been a reduction in number of units, we may have difficulty paying the debt that we have on And so then that frees that cash up to help us on that side. So it's we feel it's a win for the HRA to have that flexible funds. In addition, there would be about a $180,000 increase in contribution to the Housing and Redevelopment Fund. And it isn't just additional money, but we would also change the schedule. Currently, we don't receive a contribution the first 9 years or first 8 years. We would start receiving our contribution from the beginning under this scenario. So it's a much more steady stream of funds for our Housing and Redevelopment Fund. And then also because the TIF is larger, our 10% in admin would also go up about $180,000. So when you add it all together, the developer would receive $936,000 in additional TIF. The HRA would receive about $360,000 additional dollars in TIF, but also that's $780,000 in upfront cash. So that's the details. The MOU itself, if you've had a chance to look at, has a few other things that we'll be working through in the contract. We'll be just explaining the distribution of the tax increment, but also the construction schedule will be changing. The minimum market value has increased. And then we'll also be dealing with a future assignment of the contract to a new entity. And the new entity will include the existing development team, plus a new equity partner, Schaefer Richardson. So if you have questions, John and I are available for that. And the developer is here as well if needed.
Are there any questions? I just want to clarify that the closing date then will be on the end of October, sometime before then.
Yes, the developer wants it to occur any day now, but we wanted to make sure that there was some wiggle room in there just in case. Closings just have a tendency to not always happen the date you want them to happen.
All right. Any additional questions? Commissioner Regan Gonzalez?
I just want to thank our staff for all the hard work that they did on this. I know this was a change maybe that was unexpected, and I think that staff worked extremely hard under a time crunch to really come to a negotiation that would benefit the city and the community and the HRA, and take something that, you know, we could have maybe not benefited from, and I just thank you for taking that time, putting the work in, and thinking about the short-term impacts and the long-term on the HRA. So thank you. Huge thank you to staff.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Would someone like to move the agenda item?
I will move it. Commissioner Regan Gonzalez.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second Bruce Daniels.
All right, it's been moved by Commissioner Regan Gonzalez and seconded by Commissioner Freeze Daniels to adopt a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding with CP2 Development LLC for the Cedar Point 2 apartment development project. Is there any further discussion? All right, Administrative Assistant Dubois, would you please take the roll?
Yes, thank you. Chair Supple.
Aye.
Commissioner Regan Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Breeze Daniels.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandal. Oh, it looks like she's rejoining the meeting. Commissioner Sandal. Thank you. We have 4 ayes.
Thank you, and thank you to staff and to the developers. I'm glad to see this project going forward. Is there any further business?
There is none.
All right, being that there is none, we stand adjourned. Thank you.